Order. All right. Next up, Gene Lopez. Welcome, Gene. An update, or not an update, a presentation on new vehicle technology and OEM, original equipment manufacturer position statements. This was something, I think, kind of, we put the ball back in your court a little bit when you raised some issues at one of our prior advisory group meetings, and I thought it would be good to kind of see if we could get a presentation on some of the things that you were that were on your mind that you were wanting us to kind of work with the industry and work with the stakeholders on. And so I appreciate you taking the challenge to come before us today and give us a presentation. You're a former advisory group member yourself, representing ICAR, and now back in the industry with Seidner's Collision Centers.
Yes,
Welcome.
I am. Well, thank you, Chief DeRay, and members of the advisory group, and to your staff and members of the audience for allowing me the opportunity to deliver this information. And the ball was put back in my court. I was looking, and I hope we can continue this dialogue around an interpretation of the current code of regulations as they relate to 3303 and 3365. So, an interpretation of the California Code of Regulations as they relate to today's advanced vehicle technology. And some of the repairers agree that 3303 and 3365 don't necessarily align with the technology, the advanced technology and advanced materials that are being used to manufacture today's vehicles. And so this new vehicle technology and advancements are allowing cars to drive themselves. And we have these advanced driver assistance systems that are being placed into these vehicles. And we now need to learn how to repair them. And if we have regulations that are 33 years old or newer, but still in that 30-year, 20-year range, and they're not designed to support what the repairers need to do and learn, then we have to bring those regulations up to date. And so we also have OEM position statements today that are designed to give the repairer information, but yet they're not so designed that they are strict in their language. And I'll share a little bit of that with you in just a moment. So let's take a look at the language of these definitions. And 3303, which is a definitions regulation under Part M, says that section or sectioning means the replacement of less than a whole part or component by splicing the part or component at non-factory seams. And 3365 reads that auto body and repair frames under Part A, repair procedures including but not limited to the sectioning of component parts, just like in the definition, not limited to the sectioning of component parts shall be performed in accordance with OEM service specifications or nationally distributed and periodically updated service specifications that are generally accepted by the auto body repair industry. So both of these are fine and true the way they stand today. But when we start to look at some of these advanced technological advancements in manufacturing vehicles today, we may need to take a closer look at these regulations. And that's what we're looking for, is to have a better interpretation or maybe an amendment to what these definitions are currently saying today.
And just to be clear, these are Title 16 regulations, California Code of Regulations, these two sections, which means they're bar regulations. I'm not sure when they were adopted, maybe even predating my stay here or term here at the Bureau. But yeah, those are, I just want to make clear, those are Bureau of Automotive Repair adopted regulations.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I think it's either 97, 96 or 97 when they were last amended.
Okay.
And so.
About the time I came on, yeah.
Yeah, and so if anybody, can you confirm, Jack? You were probably on the scene back then?
Yeah, no, this was part of the 95, 96. There was an auto body advisory group that got together with all the stakeholders, including insurers and auto body shops, to develop those regulations. So it was there was a lot of work putting that together to make sure we got it just right back then. But of course, the technology has changed since
20
then.
years
Yeah, right.
plus,
No,
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the right time frame as I recall.
So, and I have, the next few slides are from information that was published by Honda Motor America, Honda Motor Company. And they're talking about partial panel replacement at factory seams versus what we learned in the definition of sectioning at non-factory seams. So Honda and other manufacturers have designed the vehicles today because of these advancements in metallurgy. We now have these ultra high strength steels or advanced high strength steels, and we look at, if we're knowledgeable enough, we look at what type of metals we are working with, and there's a definite description of tensile strength in these metals, and we, if we're informed and if we've looked at the information that's been given to us, we'll learn that there are some metals we can cut, and there are some metals that we cannot cut, absolutely cannot cut, and so we have to know this, and so the manufacturers have built these service parts, and we can use them as they're supplied. And that's the preferred method by the manufacturer, except when using that part would cause unnecessary or excessive intrusion into the body structure. And let me show you what I'm referring to there. In this slide, we're looking at a service part, and this just happens to be a rear inner panel service part. And the example is that we are going to replace, the only part that's damaged on the vehicle as we've ordered this part is that green portion there where it's the rear outer wheelhouse. Now, we get this service part and the OEM would say, yep, this is the part you're going to use. But there's an exception here. If we use that, what looks like a purple or brown portion up there, I call it orange, and in my screen it's orange, but is there a pointer on here? Yeah. So this portion right here is the roof reinforcement beam. Now, if we use this part as it's supplied, we'd have to take off the roof. And that's the intrusion, that's the exception for an intrusion. We don't want to have to take off the roof. If only this portion is damaged. So manufacturers today have allowed us to take their supplied part and disassemble it so that we only have to use the portion that's damaged on the vehicle. You get that? And so we didn't do this. We weren't doing this 20 years ago today. We may not have been doing it 6 or 7 years ago from today. So understanding what partial panel replacement is as compared to sectioning a vehicle is really important. So let's take a look at steel part sectioning guidelines. And these sectioning, I'm trying to keep up with two screens here. These sectioning guidelines have us make a replacement of steel parts at factory seams, again as compared to non-factory seams, at factory seams, and matching the replacement part configuration remain the preferred repair methods of the vehicle manufacturers. Again, there's an exception. However, these methods alone are not always practical nor cost effective. Depending on where the damage is, in understanding what the guidelines are, an informed repairer, knowledgeable, with accreditations, will be able to make those decisions, repair decisions, and then follow the guidelines. So revised guidelines that are detailed in this next screen are intended as basic rules, and check this out, for properly trained collision repair professionals. That's a key point, because if you're not properly trained and you don't or haven't gained access to this type of information, you could put someone in jeopardy who's driving that vehicle after this vehicle has been repaired, and I'll show that to you in just a little bit. So here are the sectioning guidelines that are described in the American Honda Motor Company description of steel part sectioning, and what we're looking at here is this single layer area steel part. That's okay to section. That's okay to cut through at a non-factory seam. That's where that original definition comes back into play. It's still valid today, and we're still making those types of repairs today. But what we didn't know back 20 years ago, or what we didn't have rather 20 years ago, were these reinforcements and stiffeners inside these frame rails. So we can't cut those. And if we don't know how to look for these, and if we don't know what they are, we're going to cut into a section and re-weld it in an area that would change the impact or change the collision energy and transfer it somewhere else where it possibly wasn't designed to go. That meaning that the collision energy would enter the passenger cabin when it wasn't supposed to enter the passenger cabin. And why would it do that? Well, we made that rail stronger, and because it was made stronger, it didn't collapse the way it was designed to collapse. Is that understood? Good, good. And so now we're talking about this knowledge or lack of knowledge. And ICAR has said for a number of years now, I think beginning about 2009 or 2010, that there's no consistent technical training in the collision repair industry. And they know that because of the amount of credentialed businesses. Right now, there's somewhere around 3,600, 3,700 gold class businesses in the country. Here in California, there are 900. And so ICAR tells us that they know this because it's information based on the 2015 census. And in the 2015 census, and maybe someone here at the bar can confirm or give me better information around the California shops, but the 2015 census that ICAR looked at data, it says there's 3,913 shops. I think there's a few more than that. Maybe not 500 more, but there could be a few more than that. So my point is this, is that there's 900. So here in California, the gold class shops represent about 23%, if that number is right, represent about 23% of the businesses repairing vehicles today. But there's still about 70% that may not be consistently training on how to repair these vehicles. And that's the part that we need to begin taking a look at, is what are the other 70% doing? And they may be doing the right thing, but I have to believe that because they are not informed and because they're not training, they may not know some of the things that the vehicle manufacturers are telling us and showing us how to repair these vehicles. So here's a slide from, and I think this is interesting because it's a slide that's based on a miles per gallon equivalent, and it was developed by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration along with the Environmental Protection Agency. But what this graph is showing is from about 1978 until 2011, the average fuel economy of a vehicle, of a passenger car, was about 26 miles per gallon, and a little bit less for a light truck. Right until about 2012, when we started seeing some of these advances in manufacturing and advanced high-strength steels and lightweight lightweight materials being put on these vehicles and new construction on these service parts, that the miles per gallon began to improve. And that's what was supposed to happen, right? In the Obama administration, they took these CAFE standards or corporate average fuel economy standards, and in order to meet these standards, you had to lighten the vehicle or put in hybrid type technology in order to achieve the increased fuel mileage, right? So vehicles went from 26 miles a gallon in 2011 to better than 30 miles per gallon in the next few following years. So my point of showing you this slide is that in order to achieve these CAFE standards, vehicle manufacturers had to change the way they were building these cars. So let's look at what the vehicle manufacturers or the OEMs have done in relation to these advanced materials and vehicles. And so OEMs have a lot of OEMs. I'm just put 4 up here on the screen, but they have used part position statements. And these statements are, what was the term used? They're couched as to protect them from some liability, right? So it's kind of soft language. They want us to only use their authentic parts, but they don't tell us directly. So they use this type of language. Fiat Chrysler Automotive says it does not approve or recognize structural repair procedures where authentic Mopar parts are not used. What's that telling us? We just don't approve it. Go ahead and do it, but we don't approve it. And the same thing goes with Ford. Ford says that salvage collision parts are not covered by the Ford Motor Company's new vehicle service part or corrosion warranty. Kia also says it cannot recommend the use of aftermarket auto body parts or components obtained from recycled salvaged vehicles. And the same thing with Nissan North America. So there's a couple of domestic, a couple of Asian, and there are European vehicle makers that also have these types of position statements. So when I bring this up, and it's a little bit, I have to be a little bit careful because we're asking for the cake and wanting to eat it too. And that's because there are benefits to using used parts and not necessarily following some of those position statements as they relate to used parts. Because the use of an aftermarket or used or recycled part may save the vehicle from becoming a total loss. And it's very commented. Let's say we have something like, I don't know, a 10-year-old car. It's a 2008 Buick, real nice car, and it still has a certain value. Let's say it's $15,000. But repairs to the front end of that vehicle, if they're all OEM or all original equipment parts, could reach the threshold value of that vehicle and total it out. Now, the owner of that vehicle might be a senior, someone more, 75 years old. Let's throw a number out there. And they would prefer to not have to start payments all over again on a car. So the opportunity might be for us to use used parts to keep that vehicle from being a total loss. Now, according to some OEMs, there are some parts, structural and suspension parts, that have to be original equipment. And we tend to agree with that. But on the other side, we have some business partners who are insurers, and the insurers dictate via their policies that used or aftermarket parts must be used, even on late model vehicles. So we're in a real pickle here. We want our cake and eat it too. We need to follow policies that around suspension and structural parts. And when we have a brand new vehicle, a 2018 with 1,000 miles on it, we want to be able to use that brand new part as well. It's a bit of a challenge. But I do want to make clear here is that while there are position statements for parts, we don't want to include those in position statements for procedures. There's a very definite line there, and so we see that position statements used. The position statements for used or aftermarket parts are difficult to follow because current position statements are printed representation of an OEM's philosophy. What they're trying to do is have a little brand conquering or aftermarket conquering. They only want to sell their parts, and rightly so. They should, and so. In some cases, we need to align with them, and in other cases, we need to be able to go and take a used part off a salvage vehicle that's bolted on. Let's make that certainly clear that we're using bolted on parts so that there's no structural suspension included in when we use those type of parts. So also, some of these position statements on parts are difficult to follow because unless the OEM has statements on used or aftermarket parts that include terms like prohibited or not authorized, until we have that from the OEMs, it just looks like their statement is just expressing their preference, and we know that it is. But and I have to be certain about this: that position statements for specific repair procedures and replacement of these parts must be followed. And ICAR has also put a bulletin out regarding OEM procedures versus ICAR because in that Regulation 3365, the statement of using pardon me for a second. The portion of 3365 where it says nationally distributed and periodically updated service specifications that are generally accepted by the auto body repair industry. This is what this is speaking to, right? The generally accepted portion. And ICAR put this out, I think, in 2015. And because of some of these position statements that were coming out, and because of learning that vehicles weren't being prepared properly, they had to make the statement and say, always follow the vehicle maker procedures. And OEM procedures are service specifications, not recommendations, like a parts position statement is. Parts position statement tend to be a recommendation. These service specifications are must-do, must-have stuff. And so ICAR says that first and foremost, always refer to the body repair manual for the make, model, year, and position and part in question. And then, if that doesn't exist, the next step would be to refer to any original equipment manufacturer specific published position statement or a general procedure. So, if we're repairing a car and we go to look to see how it was manufactured, and if there's any specifications to rebuilding this car, and we don't find any, we have the opportunity here to go look, and we know that in certain hits you have to perform certain procedures, so we'll know where to go find those. If you don't know, how are you rebuilding that vehicle correctly? And finally, ICAR says that if there's no vehicle-specific repair information and no OEM published position statement or general procedure, the last step would be to look for ICAR published best practices. And their best practices are inter-industry developed and vetted guidelines. So we can rely on some of the statements, or on all the statements that ICAR is putting out there. So here are the effects of not following OEM procedures and guidelines. Some of you may be familiar with John Eagle Collision in Dallas and the lawsuit that they were brought under, and cost them $31.5 million for not repairing a vehicle correctly. one of the lawyers was captured in this or quoted in this trial as saying that from a jury's perspective or from the perspective of the ordinary public, the maker of any auto is the expert on everything about the vehicle, including how it should be repaired. And here's that vehicle. I wish I could blow this up, but the scene of the accident is on the left here. And that's a 2010 Honda Fit. Now, this vehicle T-boned a light truck who crossed into their path. It was the light truck's fault. But the cause of the accident caused the severity of this accident caused this car to roll over onto its roof, caught on fire, and because the roof wasn't repaired correctly, the driver was trapped in this fiery collision and received, from what I understand, and I hadn't known this before, but were 4th-degree burns, so that even now after he's recovered from his injury, he still has nerve-ending pain because of these burns. It's tragic. And so what we learned in evidence, the lower right-hand photograph here, is that this vehicle was repaired using no welding technology. And Honda shows us, and it's difficult to read, but they have installation procedures for this 2010 Honda Fit. And on this Honda Fit, there are 120 welds that need to be provided when you're repairing this vehicle correctly. So let me summarize all of this, and hopefully we can get interpretations from the bar and from industry and everyone and all of the stakeholders in the industry to take a look at these regulations and how they can be amended. So current regulations do not align with late model vehicles. And repairs may not be consistently trained. As a matter of fact, in my research, I found this document of California legislative information. It is Article 10.5, Auto Body Repair 9889.5. Chief DeRay, you may be. It's the business and professions code. And this is interesting. This was last dated effective January 1st, 1996. I don't know if anything has been revised since then, but it under 9889.50, the legislature finds the following. Thousands of California automobile owners each year require repair to their vehicles as a result of collision or other damage. California automobile owners are suffering direct and indirect harm through unsafe, improper, incompetent, and fraudulent auto body repairs. And there's a lack of training and equipment that auto body repair shops need to meet the demands of highly evolved and sophisticated automobile manufacturing industry. And there's a few other items. So my point is that we're still at that 70%, and we were probably at even a larger number back in the mid-90s. So looking at these regulations and understanding where the industry is at today, maybe we can make some recommendations from this department so that we can have some improvements there. And that the generally accepted, probably the procedure to repair that Honda Fit was probably a generally accepted procedure that came from the street, if anywhere else, right? Oh yeah, I've got this really cool glue. It works just like a weld bond. Go ahead and put it on. Right? You're going to save the labor of preparing for 120 welds. We can't do that. We have to follow the vehicle manufacturer's instructions. So guidelines and procedures must be followed. And I really believe that we should continue this conversation in workshops or task force development so that all the stakeholders in the industry can come together in the state of California and re-review these regulations. So thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions.
Wow. Thank you, Gene. That was an amazing presentation, really informative. I certainly want to now take the challenge back to us and see what we can do as far as moving this discussion forward. Workshops, I am very much committed to doing that, undertaking that maybe as early as our next advisory group meeting, something to piggyback on that October meeting. A workshop would be very much something I would support doing if we can put that together by then.
Okay.
Questions or comments from the advisory group members? Jack Maladonoff.
Yeah, Jack Maladonoff, California Auto Body Association. Thank you, Gene. A very good presentation. You covered a lot of stuff here. I mean, you got the training part of it. You talked about parts. You talked about procedure. So you covered quite a bit to digest. I just wanted to touch on the 900 gold class iCar facilities in California, right? Mm-hmm. So just so you know, I think your 30% is incorrect, because the latest count based on the number of shops in collision repair shops in California that was provided to the Department of Insurance so they can do their labor rate survey was around 6,200 and 6,250 or something like that. That's what I remember in that number, maybe closer to 6,300. So based on that, it looks like maybe 15% of California shops have iCar Gold training. So we may want to take a look at that, which even it just, when you hear it's
yeah. It seemed low to me, and as I recall, in my 7 years at iCar, I'll beat my chest. we had a few more during my tenure. We had a few more gold class businesses, but that number, that 3,900 number, it certainly seemed low, and that's why I asked if we could get that defined a little bit. I didn't realize it was 6,000.
Yeah, it's about 6,200 or so, if not mistaken. Maybe Pat, but that was the number that was provided to the Department of Insurance because they had to clean up the list, and that includes the list wasn't as clean because it didn't include new car dealerships because they were registered as under the BAR, but they were listed the way the form was under. They sell cars and mechanical. They didn't list collision, so they had to clean up the list. But the bottom line is that it's about 6,300, okay, or 62 and a half, or somewhere around there approximately.
I'll make that.
So that's that. So that means maybe we need to talk about the training aspect here in California. So part of this task force or group or whatever, I think that's important as well, because my understanding, I'm not a tech, but usually these decisions are made. I equate the collision repair facility, when they look at a particular vehicle, they're more aligned to not mechanical, but more like a doctor, right? They go through and they talk to the customer. Hey, should we put used parts on? Do we want to, or how are we going to do this? Are these going to be OEM parts? How are we going to repair this stuff? So they're more like a doctor, right? Talking to the customer to determine how they're going to repair the car correctly. So the training may be one area we may want to explore a little further in terms of training requirements and that sort of thing. The other thing you touched on was the John Eagle case. And that's a really significant case for the entire, industry. Obviously, a significant lawsuit in Dallas. It was a new car dealership type situation, as I recall. I remember, and it's been a little while, but I remember the depositions and reading some of the depositions. And one of the reasons, in that case, that vehicle was supposed to have the welds you mentioned.
Yes.
But they glued the roof on.
Yes.
It was, and you hear that and you think, why the heck would you do that? But as I read the deposition, and not to take, throw our good friends in the insurance industry under the bus, but part of the reason was that's all they were going to pay for. And they weren't just pay for the adhesive; they were going to pay for the welds. And so the shop, during that deposition, he said, "Well, that's what we did because the insurance company said that's all they were going to pay for." So that's the reason they did it, and that came out during the lawsuit. If I'm not mistaken, that was the reason. And so there's always this striking the right balance in the industry because the collision repair facilities are working with the insurers, right? And they're partners and DRPs, and you want to get this done correctly, repair correctly, but then the cost situation comes up, right? And so it's always a balancing act. and very challenging for the collision repair industry and the insurers. So it's complicated. You know, you've got a lot of parties involved here: the consumer, obviously the shop, you've got the insurance company paying for the repairs. I like your idea about maybe doing something further and exploring, because it is a complicated area. There are a lot of tentacles out there. It's a tangled web, and I like your idea of maybe if the BR is interested in kind of pursuing this and doing some sort of committee or task force that really spends some time and seeing how we can really help consumer safety out there. Improve the industry in terms of training and that sort of thing. So I thank you, because I know you spent a lot of time on this and providing us with this presentation. So thank you very much. It was a very good presentation. Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Other commenters? Yes, Nikki?
Yeah, doesn't this lead us back to the age-old debate of who has an ARD and any licensing instead of just paying $100 to be able to open a shop? I mean, anybody can open a shop and have no training year after year after year. Technicians can come into the industry with no training, no nothing, and it leads us all back to that. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Nikki. Nikki Ayers. Bud Rice?
So, hi, Gene, and thank you. Yeah, great presentation. I might have been at our last BAG meeting. I kind of broached the subject a little different than you're bringing it up today, and it was kind of like I touched the third rail a little bit when I did that. I'll be honest and tell you that this is not my area of expertise. I'm more comfortable talking about smog, but I think this is the next big program that needs to get some attention on it, just like we've spent a lot of time talking about smog check. So even though it's not my area of expertise, story I'll tell is that if you were to walk by the beach and the water heads out, you don't have to start thinking about, well, that's odd. You better run, right? Because there's a tidal wave coming. And you may correct me here, but probably if you were to take the universe of cars, probably the bulk of them end up getting crunched somewhere around year 3 and 6. I would imagine something in there is where a bunch of these cars, generally speaking, might get crunched. And if you buy that story, and I'm making it up, but if you were to buy that story, we're looking at a moving window that as new cars are coming in that are more sophisticated, and you started your presentation talking about autonomous cars and cars that help navigate, as those cars are moving downstream and this moving window starts moving this way, this problem is a tidal wave that's going to be hitting us if we're not careful. That's what I think. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. And my former director at ICAR, he coined the phrase, we're looking at a technical tsunami. And we are. And he coined that phrase in 2012. Looking at all these advancements and the industry not being prepared to understand what it takes to repair one of these vehicles.
Well, and even to the extent that, when you look at, why do you have your wheels aligned? Well, you have your wheels aligned because for some reason your car's not 100% true anymore. Something's happened, right, and your car's not 100% true. So with this vehicle, you're going to do a front end alignment, and maybe you're going to do caster, camber, toe, but you're going to start making adjustments to get the car true again with that alignment. I think the same thing is true here. When we're doing these kinds of repairs, the car comes out of the manufacturer 100% true. Now at the point where it gets crunched, you're trying your best to get back, and it may never be 100% true, but we may agree that 85 and above that's okay. If we can get to 85 and above, that's going to be okay. But how you maneuver in that channel is where I think the real challenges are going to be, because you're going to have to figure out a way to adjust these sensors just like you adjust for a front end alignment, so that you can get the car as true as possible, even from the readings from these sensors, so that they're as accurate as possible to put the guy back on the road again. Right? Right?
Yeah, but the accuracy will need to be much greater than that 85%. True story. It was just a few weeks ago, and this is in a New England state. A consumer had a crack in his windshield. And he went to a windshield replacement, and it was based on insurance company's procedure to use an aftermarket windshield. So he got back in his car, went onto the freeway, and the car started pulling him into traffic. You see, there's a camera on that rear window that's a crash avoidance system, and because it wasn't calibrated properly, and it couldn't be calibrated properly because of the aftermarket whatever's in that aftermarket windshield wouldn't allow it wasn't calibrated anyway, but it would have been impossible to calibrate it because in this case, whatever the vehicle manufacturer puts in that glass had to be there. So we have to get these. I work for a really great company, and do we make mistakes? Yeah, but we're auditing for those types of mistakes, and we're making sure that when cars leave our facility, they're done right, and they have to be, right? The last thing we need is for a vehicle start to veer into traffic and injure someone or worse. So,
Yeah, but even that adjustment you're going to make at that time also entails, fishtails back into the right to repair. You need this information. You need the ability to be able to make these modifications to get the car as close to true as you can to get it back on the road again. I think it's huge. The problem's huge. Thank you.
well, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ben. Other comments, questions? David Kusa.
Thanks, Pat. Dave Kusa, ASCC Automotive Service Council. So, Gene, thanks. Great presentation. And what you say exactly true. The repair side, we're seeing this, this tsunami of technology. And, Nikki brings up the certification licensing process that has been, kind of that third rail. I think that maybe part of the mission of the task force or the work group would be to help consumers understand exactly what you're saying, because you could go down the street and ask anybody driving a car if they think automotive technicians or body shop technicians are licensed, and they'll say yes, right? They think that we are licensed, and obviously we know we're not. So if there is the only way I think that we get past specifically for the collision industry issues, our car is great, right? Consumers don't know it exists, right? They go where their body shop or their insurance company tells them to go, or where their friend does, or wherever they find on Google, right? So if they understood that 15% of the collision shops in the state are the top tier shops, and 70% of them may or may not be, there might be some consumer outrage or push against the control of the insurance companies of your industry specifically, and trying to get a hold of my industry.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Other comments or questions? Anything from the webcast? Oh, yes. I was going to ask you, how many facilities in Seidner's?
14.
14, okay.
One of them is a satellite facility.
All in
They're
Southern California?
all in 3 counties: LA,
Yeah.
Riverside, and San Bernardino County.
Okay. And you have a guest with you, do you not?
I do. Mr. Seidner and Mr. Stabler are here.
Okay. Which
thank
two
you.
are those? Okay. Welcome. I saw your hand come up. I assume you want to come up. Is it Mr. Seidner?
This is
No, I don't know who's who. So,
Randy Stabler.
Randy Stabler and Mr. Seidner's.
I just wanted to say, Bruce, thank you very much for even taking the time to listen to this. I wanted to buttress a couple things that Gene had said, in that the Bureau of Automotive Repair, maybe it's not on. Maybe you could turn it on.
Thank you.
How about that?
Yeah, perfect.
So I could hear myself fine. So in any event, to just add on and try to bring some clarity, the Bureau of Automotive Repair is a regulatory body, is a Department of the Consumer Affairs. I know that some of this can sound self-serving, but the consumer is ultimately the one that is at risk here. And if we're not producing safe repairs, and it's more delicate than most people realize. Today, even repairing a plastic bumper on many cars today is an unacceptable option by the manufacturer because it has a lane departure sensor. And if you put any filler material on that bumper, it won't sense the car next to it, and that person could get into an accident because the car doesn't sense it. So I could go on and on. There's no new car that you can buy today where you can replace the headlight without having a vehicle scan, an electronic scan, and resetting fault codes. That is not being done by the 70% or more than that of collision repair shops. And to your point, this is a hockey stick of technology that the regulators have to get around to protect the consumer. And I'm a little bit fearful after I saw the technology display of how long it's going to take to be able to get new systems in place. There won't be any cars driving on the road if we wait till 2028 to be able to come up with regulations that protect the consumer. So that's my encouragement.
Thank you, Randy. That was
Thank you, Mr. Stabler.
Randy Stabler from
Yeah.
Pride Auto Body.
Thank you. Any other further comments? Okay, thank you so much, Jean. Well, we do. Charlie Peters.
I'm honored.
There's Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. There's one piece of this that I didn't hear anything about today that I think is really important. And that was touched on by the immediate previous speaker. And it's how do you get consistent quality and performance in the marketplace that we don't seem to be able to accomplish at this point, and deal with issues of misinformation that exists, where factory procedure says this, when in fact that ain't true. So how do you resolve those kinds of issues and get to a point where you're appropriately serving the public and making appropriate repairs? And so there's a piece of that that doesn't seem to be being addressed here, and that part that's being addressed is the most important technology that's ever existed, and that's the stuff between people's ears and empowering them to become a part of the system, and for what's between their ears and their knowledge and their experience to matter in the process, and to create an ability for that to matter in the outcome of an individual repair. And it happens constantly, it's ongoing, and it never seems to really get addressed, and it's critically important that it gets addressed, particularly right now because, as it has been shared here, this is a big deal. But if we don't do anything to genuinely incorporate the guy doing the job and empower him to make a difference and have an opinion that matters to best serve the public in a way that is effective appropriately, then we're going to crash and burn. That's how it is. The concern here is absolutely correct, but I think there's an additional piece that needs to be considered, if you would, Mr. DeRay and committee.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much, Gene.
Thanks.
Good to see you again.